The Book of Boba Fett is one of those shows that was very much anticipated, as it was finally a chance to see the character get the spotlight he deserves, especially with him coming back in Mandalorian Season 2. I think fans were very excited. But I have to say, after the series is done, I think overall it was quite disappointing. It's a very odd show to sort of review because it's got very great moments, but it's also very weak in a lot of areas. So it just leaves this sort of very mediocre experience at the end of it all. The show follows the ending of Mandalorian Season 2 with Boba Fett becoming this crime lord type of figure. But for the first sort of few episodes of the show, it's more about telling us the story in between Mandalorian Season 2 and Return of the Jedi for Boba. So we sort of see him, how he survived the Sarlacc pit and him living with the Tuskens. And I actually quite like this stuff.
Yes.
I think this was the best stuff for Boba Fett as a character in the show. And we get to see him sort of go through this almost like spiritual rehab with it, and he definitely sort of reconsiders his life and stuff like that. And I think that was quite interesting, and that was quite a good story beat. But it's a shame how that it kind of carried into the main plot of the story, but not really. And it should have done, because it did take up a lot of time on those first few episodes, which I think halted the plot of the sort of the present timeline. So when we do get onto the present timeline, we haven't really seen it much, so there's not much investment there from the viewers. And I think that's maybe a shame. Maybe it should have had more episodes if they wanted to tell, the past story and this present one at once, because it's clearly they were trying to fit quite a lot into the first few episodes, especially later on, which I'll get onto, where you have 2 episodes which are just Mandalorian Season 3, so this is really only 5 episodes of an actual Boba Fett show, and about a good 3 of them are primarily flashback stuff. It's not really progressing the present plot. So yeah, I maybe think the flashbacks went on a bit too long, but I did enjoy them. But personally, I don't think we needed to see him, finding Fennec and getting his ship back and all that. I think that was fine. I think us as the audience could have easily filled in the gaps. I mean, it's nice to see it, but when it's limiting sort of time of the actual main plot, maybe it could have been cut aside. Now on to the actual main plot of Boba Fett becoming this crime lord. It's very weak, and I think that's because there's not really a plot there. It's meant to be him sort of re-establishing order on Mos Espa, but we never really get to see it, being in such a bad way, and we never see that his impact on it is improving it. It just kind of is the same at the start, and it's the same at the end. So it really tries to make you care for Mos Espa, but it's barely like a thing. Like, if you're doing a story where it's about a character protecting a certain location, that location needs to feel alive and like a character, and they just didn't do a good job with doing that in this series. Like, no one really cared about Mos Espa. A lot of people had a problem with the way Boba Fett was acting on the show, and I have to agree. He was definitely too much of a pushover. I think it would have been cool to see him be that ruthless version of him we saw in the originals, and then he could have sort of, throughout the present plot point, he could have sort of remembered the things he'd learned with the Tuskens, that humility and that community, and that could have applied more into his character, creating this sort of great arc of him sort of remembering the lessons he's been taught. But they didn't really do that, and it just sort of comes out as like, we wanted to see Boba Fett, and it feels like you don't really see him. He barely has any action scenes. I think the biggest one you get is in the last episode, and that's a real shame when you've got like a whole series and there's only one sort of, I guess, notable part, which is sort of in the last episode. But he's just sort of sat around doing no, and I think it's a real shame. As I mentioned, this show is only about 5 episodes because 2 of them are pretty much dedicated to Mandalorian Season 3.
This is the way.
They completely don't involve Boba at all, and it's not really woven into the plot either. It isn't really part of that story, so it makes me question why they even included it. I like the Mandalorian stuff. I thought it was great, seeing that predominantly episode of Mandalorian getting his new ship, and we get to see him doing that bounty at the beginning, and we get some great action there. And I also like how you get to see, Grogu training and stuff like that. But does that belong in this? Like, do you get what I mean? I think, to be honest, they should have just cut that completely out and just left that for Season 3 and just have Mandalorian not be in this. Or if have him in it, don't give him 2 whole episodes to himself. He sort of took over the show, essentially. Like Luke Skywalker sort of training Grogu shouldn't really be in a Boba Fett show. We want to watch a Boba Fett show, but it makes me think maybe they should have just done Mandalorian Season 3 and injected the Boba Fett story into that. To me, I think that would have worked better, but they haven't done that, so we sort of got this. Now on to sort of the other characters. Again, they're still sort of weak. As literally the only character you really care about in the show is probably Mandalorian and Grogu. I mean, Boba Fett's just kind of there, and Fennec's alright, but she's just kind of there as well, like, you know what I mean? And, you know, we get him sort of hiring his own group for himself, and we get Chris Santan, who's like this Wookiee bounty hunter, and he didn't really do all special. You know, he looks cool, I guess, but that's about it. We also get these, I think they're called mods, and they just stick out like a sore thumb. They just do not belong in Star Wars, or even, I mean, at a push, maybe you could do them at Coruscant, but for a Tatooine story, this just doesn't work, and they feel so out of place. Like, there's a scene in the last episode where you see, like, the people of Freetown next to him, and they honestly look like cosplayers. Like, they look so cheap and fake, and just not at all part of the universe. And whenever they're on screen, I just want to, you know, move on. So I honestly think we won't even see him again. And it's not like the actor's fault or anything, but they have no part in this story, and they had some of the worst action scenes. Like the chase scene with the sort of mayor speaker, who I do actually quite like as this sort of weaseling little dude. You know, it's pretty bad. You know, it's just slow and uneventful. With introducing this many characters, you never give an opportunity for Boba to do anything. You know, he should have really been backed into a corner, and you don't really get that. You know, it tries to do that like half-heartedly when it has all these like crown families turn on him, but you don't really feel it. You never feel like he's gonna die or anything like that. But to me, yeah, it like threw in a lot of characters, and you honestly didn't need them. I think it'd have been better if he was just, you know, he had to work it out by himself, and he was really stretched on what to do. I think that would have been much better, and we'd have got to see Boba more instead of him sort of fighting for screen time in his own show. We've also got the Parks as sort of the main villain, which is very weak. I've never really liked him, even in the Clone Wars. I thought they weren't that interesting, and the whole plot is about them getting sparse and stuff, and the show does no real point explaining why that's bad or what sparse even is, you know, to people who don't even know. It doesn't really set up that conflict at all. The only real conflict that is set up is that they killed the Tusken Raiders, which is a super missed opportunity for the next character I'm going to mention, which is Cad Bane, because they bring him in the second to last episode, and then he's dead in the episode after that. And yeah, I know he might still be alive and stuff, but for this show, we'll just say that like he's done after that. And it's such a shame that they didn't have him kill the Tuskens, and you could have built up this rivalry between Boba and Cad Bane throughout the entire show. Like, he should have been in a reveal on the second episode, Cad Bane. You know, and you could have built that rivalry up between them. Instead, he just sort of turns up at the end, and they say, "Oh, I don't like you. I don't like you either." And people who've not seen, you know, stuff like Clone Wars and anything like that, this rivalry should have been set up in the show, and we didn't get that, and it's a real shame. I liked what we got to see of Cad Bane. You know, he gets the introduction with Cobb Vanth, who I also like returning, and I think he should have been in it more. But yeah, just a real shame of a character, especially because he's one of my favourites, and he's just sort of a lackey in this. You know, he's not even the main villain, which he probably should have been. You know, the Park should have been the secondary villain, and then Cad Bane should have come in as this like foil for Boba Fett, like a constant reminder of what he used to be like. I think that'd have been really good. But yeah, what a shame. I think action-wise, it shows a real mixed bag. Like I said, you know, we get that one cool sort of action bit with Boba in the last episode with him and Mando. Even though it is stupid, they just stood in the middle of the open. You know, it's a cool enough action scene. Great when he sort of rides the Rancor, even though that barely got any setup. You know, he just gets sort of gifted it, but we don't see him. We don't even see it ever again, I don't think. You know, a lot of people are making fun that he could have just got the slave one, and to be honest, that is true. Does he even use the ship like more than once in the show? But yeah, a lot of the action, it's not even there. Like I said, the Mandalorian episode, that has a great opening action scene where he's in that sort of space butchers. But other than that, we get that awful speeder chase, like I said. And we sort of get that fight in the first episode, I think it is, where those assassins are after him. And that's pretty weak, you know, and I know it's a story of Boba Fett recovering, but after what we saw in Mandalorian Season 2, you know, it's a real shame that wasn't the whole show, essentially, like the action we saw in that episode. So yeah, overall, it was quite disappointing, the action. I think it could have been a lot better. So yeah, I have to say overall, it's not what I wanted to see, but there is some stuff I do really like, but that shouldn't be in this show, but it is part of it, so I have got to sort of look at it with that. Like, the Luke stuff is great, like him meeting Ahsoka and all that, and honestly, the CGI sort of face thing, whatever they're doing now, is great. It's sort of scary how good it is. But that stuff doesn't belong in this show, and this show should have been about Boba Fett, and I feel like he kind of became, by about the halfway point, I didn't really care about it. I just wanted sort of to know what was going on with Mandalorian, which shouldn't be the point of this, and part of me feels they should have just left Mandalorian completely out, or just have him in as a side character. Don't give him his 2 episodes by himself. Save that, because I also think with him reuniting with Grogu, that should have been saved for season 3 of Mandalorian. To me, the Book of Boba Fett should have been more separate, instead of sort of intertwining as much with that. Or you do it the other way around and you have the Boba Fett show mixed in with Mandalorian season 3. I think that could have worked if you did that as sort of a longer season. I think that could have really worked really well. But yeah, overall, kind of disappointing, but I think it has got a few good moments, and I'd probably give it about a 6 out of 10. And it's disappointing because I think I wanted a lot more out of it. But I will say it has got me excited for Mandalorian season 3. But at the end of the day, maybe we should have just got that instead. Alright, yeah, so see ya.
Jabba ruled with fear. I intend to rule.
Agabenza, 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 Agabenza. Yes.